Sumeet, good to see you. Thanks for making time to come and have a chat. I want to kick off the interview with something that you said to me previously. You said, I don't care about the AI bubble. I mean, there are a lot of people that would disagree with you about. There are a lot of people that are worrying about the AI bubble. Why don't you care? What's the story? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I think within tech, you can build a business in one of two ways these days. Either you can leverage AI and promise something that hasn't really been done before, in which case you're dependent on AI being able to deliver on that promise, or you can do what we've always done and solve problems for people that they're dealing with already. And for us, we are building infrastructure that makes it easier for large teams to just build and ship high quality products and infrastructure. Whether you're using engineers, whether you're using agents doesn't really matter. So if there is a bubble and we end up not using as many agents, that's fine. We already have the best in class product for engineers at scale today. But if agents end up becoming more and more common, our infrastructure works for them as well. So whatever happens, I think that we've got the best product in the market today. And so I'm less worried about the bubble and more worried about making sure we maintain that best in class product quality.
Cool. And just for the people that don't know your business, I mean, just very briefly, just explain, because you're doing some really interesting stuff, just explain in terms that somebody like me, a non-technical person like me would understand, just explain what you're doing exactly.
Yeah. So within engineering, everybody thinks that writing code is really the hard part. But the reality is, at a larger company, you write the code, you test it, you make tweaks, and then you ship it. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done at larger organizations from when you start writing your code to when you feel it's not going to break things when you ship it to all of your users. That is a huge problem that lots of companies spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of people trying to solve. And so we solve that for agents and engineers and have done so already for various organizations with hundreds of engineers.
Okay. And what is it? I mean, I get what you're doing. What is it you're trying to achieve? I mean, let's say a couple of years down the track, what sort of impact are you trying to have?
Yeah, so what we've built, it's not something completely new that nobody has ever seen before.
Right.
I've actually seen people build this at my previous roles. Uber has built this internally. Facebook has built this. My friends have built this at Airbnb and other companies as well.
Right.
But the only companies that have this kind of infrastructure are best in class tech companies that have invested multiple years to get this going.
Okay.
And it makes a huge difference for their engineers. I want to build a company where we bring this to every organization easily and seamlessly so that engineers can take advantage of high quality infrastructure without having to rely on their company to spend multiple years and tons of money and time making it happen.
Okay. And what is it that motivated you specifically to focus on that? I mean, there's a billion things you could have done. I mean, why that particularly?
Yeah, so this is something that has always been a challenge for me. I think I was spoiled a bit early on in Facebook by having really high quality teams build great tooling for engineers. And I've seen other organizations that didn't really have that. For me, I always liked the idea of being a founder because I didn't want to stay in my own lane, but I wasn't going to be a founder for the sake of being a founder. I wasn't going to be a founder in search of a problem. Um, but I actually ended up meeting my co-founder one day, and he had been tackling this because he saw this problem at previous roles and said, this is something that should be universal.
Right.
And most people don't get it because you need to experience this quality tooling and how it can change your engineering processes firsthand to actually understand the value. I saw it, and within a second, I said, this is what every team needs today.
Okay.
And when I saw what he had been thinking about, how he had been tackling it, and the quality of his work, I was blown away and said, this should be massive. Everybody should be using this. Why isn't everybody using this? And so we just teamed up.
Wow. And in terms of the business that you want to build, I mean, you talked about I don't want to be a founder just for the sake of being a founder.
Mhm.
I mean, what is it about that business that you want to be different? How do you, I mean, you're obviously focusing on a problem that you think has wide
Mhm.
application. Lots of people will find this valuable. In what other way do you want the company to be different? I mean, what's special about this other than a solution to this particular problem? I mean, do you have views on the way you build a company and how that should be different given your experiences?
Definitely. I think there's a few things here, right? I think one hot topic these days is a lot of companies are being pulled to bring all their employees back in the office. I think RTO has been a hot
Yeah,
topic for a few years,
yeah.
right? Um, I disagree with the urgency of that. Candidly, even 10 years ago when I was at Uber, we had teams that were distributed across Poland, Seattle, India, and the US that I was collaborating with all simultaneously. And I had managed people across different time zones.
Yeah.
And we did it. We won certain markets. We succeeded where we needed to. And the collaboration was challenging, but it was fine. And I think that post-pandemic, everybody's having this knee-jerk reaction of, oh, we were all distributed now, let's all be back in person. But the reality is it really depends. For our business, we need people with expertise and they may be distributed, but we also try to provide best in class support for our customers. And if we have customers on the East Coast when I'm based on the West Coast, or we have customers in the EU, we need to make sure people can support that. So it's actually in our best interest to have a healthy distributed team culture. Now I see the value of having, maybe sales teams sitting together so that you can learn from each other, collaborate on a regular basis, or having thought leadership at a company all together as well so you can sync up. But I think that Silicon Valley and a lot of companies in general treat this as some dichotomy of you are distributed, you are not distributed. And I think that oversimplifies the problem. So for us, this is kind of a microcosm of my larger thing around company principles. We need to figure out what makes sense for us instead of being dogmatic about what everybody just says is the best way to do things.
Yeah. And you mentioned when we spoke last time that, um, I mean, the problem that people are concerned with, the knee-jerk reaction that you just mentioned. I mean, why is it, do you think, that those companies are having that knee-jerk reaction? I mean, they're full of bright, smart people. I mean, why have they suddenly decided that people need to come back into the office? I mean, what's driving that? Because it's not just one company. I mean, lots of people have been saying that, haven't they?
Yeah. So I have had a reputation for having spicy takes at
Yes.
all of my previous companies, at company Q&As when talking with folks. So I might have some counterculture takes here. I think there's two factors. One is that in order to have a healthy distributed team, you need to have management and leadership building a culture where that can be successful. You need to be very intentional about it. Things that you do in person don't work distributed and vice versa. So during the pandemic and afterwards, we actually saw a lot of teams struggle because maybe they didn't have team leads or managers who were effectively managing those teams. You have some managers who maybe are uncomfortable trying to figure out, is my team actually doing work? Which I actually don't think is the right question to be asking. But you get this fear built in. And you have these companies that are worried, oh, we're not moving fast enough. Everybody else is moving faster than we are. With AI right now, speed is the name of the game. And how can we solve that? And there's this sense of, oh, if we bring everyone back to the office, maybe that's just a solution here, right? There's also sunk costs between people with offices they're renting out and all that stuff, but I think that's secondary. I think the other big thing, especially within Silicon Valley, um, I hope some VCs don't crucify me for this, but the reality is there tends to be these waves of thought leadership by execs, by founders, by VCs, and they kind of latch onto the latest and greatest thing. We saw this even with Web3 when everyone was talking about the value of decentralized systems, and
Yeah.
everybody had an opinion on that. I
Yeah.
think today it it is trendy and very popular to say, hey, let's all be back in the office, and VCs are pushing that. And they see results. It's not necessarily clear whether those are correlated or caused by people being back in the office, but you have people that sit on boards of multiple companies or work with various portfolios, and they keep pushing this, right? So I think it's just this momentum that's been built up that a lot of people are
Yeah.
relying on.
And you mentioned, I mean, I think your point about managers wanting to know whether stuff is getting done. I mean, I've
Mhm.
seen that myself in the past. Well,
Mhm.
you said that wasn't the right question to ask. What would be a better question?
Are you getting the results you want? I think, candidly, it doesn't really matter if somebody's working 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day. The question is, are they delivering the results you need for the business?
Mm.
If they're delivering the results and it's taking them 15 hours, okay, now you have a question of, are we overloading this person? Do they have too much responsibility? Are they the right level? The flip side, if somebody's getting results done and it's taking them 4 hours, great. Do they want a bigger role? Do they want more opportunity? They want other things to do, right? It's not a question of, hey, are you at your desk for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day when you're at home, right? And I think a lot of founders, especially founders who are early in their career, it's the best proxy for them to understand if their teams are being productive, as opposed to thinking, here's what I need to get done this quarter, which means here's what we need to do this month, which means I need people to get this stuff done. Or if you're earlier on and things are much more nebulous, we're doing a rebrand, we're launching this new feature, we need to clean this tech debt. It's happening by this date. What are the checkpoints,
Mm.
right? I don't care if one of my team members needs to take the afternoon off because they're feeling under the weather or whatever. if over the sprint or over the quarter we're able to deliver on what we need to do, who really cares, to be honest?
Mm.
And I think there's another factor here too of if you have hungry, ambitious, bright, motivated employees, they like freedom,
Mm.
right? I think micromanagement is a knee-jerk reaction when you feel a loss of control, and a lot of founders will lean into that. We saw this with founder mode earlier. But if you increase agency for your team, if you hire the right people, if you know when to let go of people and you empower them, and I think the last thing is align incentives, which we can talk about more later, and I think is the most important thing, you get the most out of them. And that's how you build a sustainable business. I'm not here trying to hit a specific number by a certain date and burn the team out so that we can then close some fundraising or have a press moment or whatever, and then have the next 3 months be a waste. I'm trying to build a business. We are relentless and consistently pushing the limits of what we need to do for years to come. That's a marathon, not a sprint.
And your point about aligning incentives, I mean, just tell us what you mean by that. I mean, I'm an economist by training. I mean, I've the big lesson I've learned in life is that if you know what the incentives are doing, you can usually tell what the people are doing. I mean, what's your take on that?
My take, specific for early stage companies, I want to find people that I'm taking a bet on, and they know I'm taking a bet on them, and I pay them that way. So one, they have more equity than they would at any other place, which means that they are more motivated to make sure the company's successful. Like, let's talk about our recent sales lead that I hired. Um, I made sure he had enough equity where he felt it doesn't matter how many meetings he schedules. What matters is how much revenue are we generating for the company.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
instead of focusing on top of funnel, I actually work with him and say, hey, how do we double our revenue, right? I don't care how many calls you get me because if they're low signal, it doesn't matter. But if you get me two high signal calls and each of them is worth a couple million as a deal, then we're good,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I want him to think the same way I think about success for our company. And how do you make that work for everybody else in your organization? And the part about making people know that you're taking a bet on them is they feel a sense of loyalty to you. You're not taking advantage of them. You're giving them something that they wouldn't have a chance to do elsewhere.
Mm.
You're giving them the chance to shine. So give them the space to rise up and do so. And if they can't, you need to learn to part ways quickly and move on. But that's how you get the most out of people, as opposed to people feeling like, oh, I need to prove myself. I've already done this multiple times in my career, so I can get back to where I was previously. And I've just seen a lot of people stagnate a bit with that. And you get a culture where everyone's just kind of waiting for the next person up, which isn't great.
Yeah. I mean, I've read, I mean, and been told by the psychologists, people I've spoken to, that said that autonomy is pretty important to most people.
Mhm.
So micromanaging, you can see that as being kind of pretty toxic. If
Yes.
particularly smart professional people are micromanaged, they want to do it their own way, don't they? And in fact, you want them to do it their way because that's how you
Yeah.
learn new ways to do things. Let me just pick up your point though about making a bet on people. I mean, one of the things that
Mhm.
always interests me is how you get the right people on the bus.
Mhm.
And I was talking to somebody the other day who said, actually, I don't recruit for conventional roles. What I do is I look for the friction in the business, where I look for where the
Mhm.
problems are, and I bring people in to solve the problems. I mean, what's your take about getting people, the right people on the bus? And if you are going to take a bet on somebody, I mean, how do you do that? What's your view of that?
So I think one thing that has helped is I've done a lot of interviews in my career. I think I've
Yeah.
probably done close to 1,000, if not more, at this point. So, you get some habits which you need to be careful of so you don't have biases, even though we all have our own. But I think I've become fairly decent at being able to see and suss out whether somebody actually is hungry, what they're trying to prove out, what they care about their career, right? And I think at our stage, we're actually looking for the traits that larger companies don't want, right? A larger organization, you need to have all the gears turning smoothly and have the machine running efficiently. We need people who have trouble staying in their own lanes, which I have had trouble doing so throughout my career. Um, and I don't really care how traditional someone's background is. I agree with the question of what are the problems and how do you solve them, right? So for us, one of our tech leads, he's our solutions architect. He spends a lot of time with a lot of our customers. Ricky, he's awesome. He was a previous startup founder. He's worked at large organizations and small. And with solutions architect, it is kind of salesy, but because he was a founder previously, I know he can talk to customers. I know he can think about the business at a higher level, which means I can give him more direct feedback about the broader scope of the business and he'll be able to take it and run with it,
Mm.
right? So you want to find people, or I want to find people that I can be very honest with and bring on board as partners and just collaborate with them really effectively, who also aren't going to be pigeonholed in a specific kind of box, right? So Blake, the sales lead I was talking about who joined, he was previously an SDR at Snowflake. He's great, but I'm pulling him into marketing conversations, into strategic positioning conversations, getting feedback on our designs of what actually will be able to go to people, right? And I need him to be willing to do that. And more than that, he's actually excited to do that. Similarly with Ricky, who's on the solutions engineering side, and a bunch of our engineers as well, right? So I think the biggest thing is finding people who are hungry, people who will span across whatever discipline they need to. And the third part, which I think everyone does, but we don't say as openly, is we need people we can work effectively with. As a founder, the journey is hard and lonely. You
Yeah.
need people who bring you energy, and there's no shame in leaning into that.
No. And I actually think that's a really important factor, actually. If you get the right people on board, there's if you get the right people, there's more energy. It's what's that I think,
Mhm.
the whole is more greater than the sum of the parts, if you see what I mean, if
Mhm.
you get the right people. Let me just pick up one of the things that's interesting about that though. One of the things that you're doing if you're developing something really new and innovative, and I think what you described, although the problem's fairly generic, I mean, your solution is quite unique, I think, unless I've understood that correctly. What that means is that you're constantly challenging the status quo. What's your take on that in a sales context? I mean, my experience has been is lots of people talk about wanting innovation, but actually, when you say innovation, they hear risk, and they're not all. Perhaps sometimes they're cautious about it. I mean, what's your take on that process of challenging the status quo because you've got something new for people?
Yeah. This gets right at the heart of our sales motion right now that we are trying to figure out. Um, so there's two different ways to look at this, right? I think when you start a company, when you're very early on, and even for a while after that, you've got founder-led sales. And then eventually you have your team built out and they handle all that stuff. I can't speak to the latter right now. Our team is still pretty small. Um, but for me at least, right, a big part of why I tackle this problem is because I have used similar tools. I've used our competition in previous roles. I've seen people build similar stuff internally. So there is a bit of social proof when I go to customers saying, "Hey, I use this at Facebook. I have friends who build this at other companies. I've used competitors at previous
Yeah,
jobs,
yeah,
right?" And when I go in, it helps for better or worse, where it's like, "Hey, I was a director of engineering at Discord. I had these teams that did all of this stuff." People say, "Cool, let's talk," right? Or when I talk to some mid-market teams, I tell them, it's like, "Hey, you were interviewing me for your head of engineering role a while back, right? Or you wanted to hire me to work on this stuff. So that means you value my technical acumen. Let me tell you why this is a problem for you."
yeah,
And so, compared to a traditional sales motion that's driven by others, there is a bit more of that weight that I can lean on from a social standpoint where people will hear me out, right? And I think there's something to be said about being a bit of an expert in your field when you're building a company. If I had never been an engineer, I think this would have been pretty tough, right? So I don't think there's a generalizable thing here that scales for every organization, depending on the founding team. But if you are someone who is truly passionate about what you're building, which ideally you are, and you have a history of working in it, rely on that. And I think people will give you the benefit of the doubt. But to your point, we are focused on mid-market and enterprise customers.
mm,
Um, there's a lot of risk the larger you get that they perceive when they see a smaller company. This is why we're focused on quality. Uh, we've actually had heads up pilots with multiple competitors, with multiple customers, and we've won all of them. And at the end of the day, it was really funny. One of them was sharing their decision criteria, and we scored better than all the competition on every single axis except concerns about future support because of the size of the team. And I
right,
said, I can't disagree with that. That is totally fair.
yeah,
But if everything else is great, then that means we should be able to make enough money where we can make that not a problem. And so, as long as we continue focusing on customer success, quality of their experience, best in class product quality, that's really the only way to address that concern around risk.
yeah. And I think your point about quality is well made. I mean, um, you know, poor quality products, whether they're software or anything else, I mean, often create more problems than they solve, don't they?
They
You
do.
know, so I can see why your point is that people will buy into that. I mean, I totally get that. Let me just ask you about something you mentioned a second ago. You talked about the kind of culture.
Mhm.
I mean, when you've got a remote team, when you've got people that are spread all over the place, and also when you've got customers
Mhm.
spread all over the place, culture is a bit more of a tricky thing to manage. I mean,
Mhm.
what's your experience of that, and how do you make or create or build a culture that is engaging and inclusive and
Mhm.
values people, even though that you've got to deal with people remotely, which often means dealing with people one to one. I mean, not always, but often it means a
Yeah.
lot of one to one. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that need to be done here. One is something that I think is true whether you're distributed or you're in person, but you need to over communicate, right? When your team is sick of hearing your message around what matters, what's happening, or whatever, that's probably when they've heard it enough, not before. And I think when people are remote, it's equally true. I think another thing is showing your work, right? As a leader,
Yeah.
I I don't shut myself off, get a bunch of customers, figure out our strategy, think through how we're going to hire and all that stuff, and just do it and then talk to my co-founder. I try to walk people through the process as much as possible. I join the daily stand-ups and tell people what my worries are, what my focuses are, and what's happening. Um, and we actually have a Slack channel for our daily stand-ups, and we meet once a week to talk through everything. In the Slack channel, I tell them, hey, I met with this vendor. Here's my concerns around our marketing strategy for Q1. Here's what I'm going to dig into. And if anybody has questions or thoughts, they can message me, right? So having an open door, keeping those honest, engaging conversations. I think Discord was actually really good for this, where I was working at during the pandemic, where let's just say the team is online more than most for personal reasons and professional reasons,
Yeah.
but it also led to people honestly engaging with each other regularly. There was no barrier to just sending somebody a direct message, right? If I had concerns about our strategy or something like that, I would message our CTO or somebody else, say like, "Hey, I'm a little worried about this. Maybe I'm being dumb here, but just tell me," right? And I want to have that kind of culture as well, where no matter how big we get, people should just message the person who can give them the best context on what's actually happening. Now, at this point, we're only 10 people, right? So it's a little bit easier for everyone to just stay in touch and build that camaraderie. Um, but I do think communication is the biggest factor. Beyond that, though, we do have some people who are in the Bay Area. We fly out folks who are remote every now and then, ideally every quarter, and we'll do some jam sessions. We'll think about quarterly planning. We'll talk through things. And if I do need to travel for work or if I'm traveling for personal reasons, somebody's nearby, I'll go visit them, right? So it's just this very intentional effort to maintain those bonds and then bring everyone along with the things you're doing as a founder.
Mm. And I mean, what's interesting about what you've said is that it's not just you talked about over communicating, and that implies constantly repeating the message. But what
Mhm.
you touched on there was about opening the door for feedback, because it
Mhm.
seems to me that one of the loops that can get broken is leaders spend a lot of time talking at people, and the feedback loop can get lost. And it seems to me you're emphasizing the importance of that feedback loop.
Absolutely. I don't fully agree with everything that was in the founder mode essay that went viral a while back. I think there are some points that are really valid of you need to be in tune with the business. You need to know what's going on. I don't think founders know everything, right? I think there is
No,
a danger around
that's right.
glamorizing being the smartest person in the room or knowing things the best just because you've been around the longest. It really comes down to collaboration. Maybe you know the outcomes the best,
Mm,
right? But how you do things, you need feedback, right? I don't know how to build a sales machine or engine from scratch and do cold outreach. I can learn it, but I probably need sales folks to help me do that, right? We're going through a repositioning and thinking through our branding right now and really clarifying our value prop. I can do that, but I haven't done a rebrand myself. I haven't done a true marketing campaign myself. Why would I assume that I know it better than everyone else, right?
mm.
And I've seen this in the past where founders push in a direction they have high conviction in, but they have conviction just because they have conviction. They
Yeah.
don't actually have anything backing from what they've done. And so being able to disambiguate, okay, I'm the expert in this case, please trust me. And I have strong conviction over here, but I could be an idiot. So please tell me what information I'm lacking to help me understand how to shift it. Right. And I think that the latter case is really important. I see a lot of founders struggle because they don't really lean into that, or they lean into it too much and they don't lean into their conviction of what they're actually good at. So
Mm.
finding that balance is tough, but I think it's crucial.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And interestingly, I mean, one of the things that's happened in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years is the idea of, getting an MVP and getting
Mhm.
it into the hands of customers while you're still embarrassed about it.
Mhm.
That has taken, and that didn't used to happen 15, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
That's a relatively recent thing, and I think it's a very powerful thing because that kind of opens up the feedback loop and
Mhm.
creates an organization that is more used to getting feedback. Because, the good stuff, you don't, the good stuff that it's great to hear, oh, I love your product. That's great. But what you really want to know is it doesn't work in this situation so you can get it
Yep.
fixed. You want to know the bad stuff, actually. And without
Absolutely.
that feedback loop, you slow yourself down, don't you? And
Mhm.
just to pick up that point, what's your approach to communicating with customers? Because it seems to me that the other thing that's important is if you have a culture in the business where there's open feedback loops, you're more likely to create open feedback loops with customers. Is that your experience? Is that what you're trying to do? How do you kind of engage with customers? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so with large organizations, there is this delicate balance of you don't want to annoy them too much. You don't want
Yeah.
to schedule a ton of meetings and stuff, but we have a Slack channel with every single one of our customers. And so if they have any issues, they bring it up. I want to make sure we always respond timely, like minutes, ideally. Um, I try to check in with my co-founder if he's busy or one of our other engineers if they ask a really technical detail, so I don't put my foot in my mouth for something I didn't personally build. Um, but I think it's very meaningful, especially because a big part of our brand is we provide the best support in the market for what we do. And we have a very complex, technical, challenging problem space that we're working in. So there will be lots of questions. There will be lots of customizations. We want to help people with that. So I think having that Slack channel is really great. And then if people are open to it, we have monthly syncs just to see, hey, what are your plans? What's going on, right? And you build that trust. We've seen that, especially within engineering, engineers are not shy about raising their voice when something is broken or something isn't working as expected.
Mm.
As a deprecated engineer who used to complain about stuff often, I get it and I empathize with them. So that has never been an issue. I think the bigger thing is if we show that we're responsive, if we're proactive about solving things and we follow through on our word, they then trust us more. So then we can get to that second order of questions around instead of this is broken or this is a bug, it's hey, we're thinking about this problem next year. We don't know if you can solve it, but we'd love to talk to see if there is something you can do to make it happen. And so then we actually partner with our customers to shape our roadmap and make our product better overall. And I would argue that that's where the real value in the business lies, because then you see, oh, a lot of our customers, I'll give you a real example. Um, One of our customers that we have a pretty good relationship with earlier this year was talking about how they needed support for more GPO focused workloads, AI type stuff, which needed a different cloud provider. And we said, okay, that's interesting. We started digging some of the use cases that were pretty novel. We then took that and started asking some of our other customers, like, hey, if we built this, would this be interesting? And they had never proactively brought it up, but all of them said, oh, we've been thinking about this. This would be great. Right. So all of a sudden, we got that novel insight from people on the cutting edge of building AI infrastructure at scale. And then we're able to realize, oh, we can solve this for everybody better than anybody else can. And so that unlocks so much value for the customers, for your business, and builds trust with everybody. So, yeah, having those real time communications and following through on those commitments to your customers makes such a big difference.
Mm. It's interesting you describe your relationships with customers as partnerships
Mhm.
because that's going beyond the kind of transactional buyer seller
Mhm.
idea, isn't it? Is that about you, do you think, or is that what you've seen as good practice, or is that what improves the bottom line? What's driving that kind of change in thinking?
I think all of the above. We talked about aligned incentives earlier,
Yeah.
right? I think it is important to have a relationship with your customers where you building the best product possible and building a wildly successful business is great for them too.
Mm.
And everybody wins. I had somebody tell me the best thing you can do when selling products to businesses is make the POC look so good by choosing your product that it gets them promoted. And I was like,
Okay. Yeah.
that's that's actually a pretty good way of looking at it, right? So
Yeah.
I want to make the people who took a bet on us look so good that it would be ludicrous for anybody to say, maybe we should use something else. And everybody just kind of wins if you do that, right? You help them do the things they need to do. And this is part of our value prop for our business as well. We take off the load of managing common, complex problems for engineering teams so they can focus on what's unique to their business, right? And so there's a value prop for them, there's value prop for us, there's obviously the transactional money aspect over here. But to me, it really is a partnership because every single engineering organization is slightly different. So there will be some customizations. There will be some tweaks, but we want them, and this goes back to my vision of what crafting could be, right? We want each of these organizations to just be so much more efficient, so much more effective, and these engineers and these agents just be so much more productive in a healthy way. So let's just make that happen. And if we are going to do that, we need to treat them as partners as opposed to a transactional customer at the other end of an invoice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting take on that. You mentioned about, as it were, the long-term aspect to that.
Mhm.
And I came across something similar. I mean, I had a period working in consultancy, and
Mhm.
the objective there was always to get your client to, you know, you get
Yeah.
promoted if you like. That was that kind of idea that you make the client look great by doing the work. In terms of the longevity of the relationship, I mean, do you consciously go into it thinking we want to build long-term partnerships? I mean, how do you approach that? Because you can't really deliver a partnership unless you think long-term, I don't think.
Yes,
Does that feature in your thinking?
absolutely. So going into our sales motion a little bit, right? We do multi-month pilots for free. We tell everybody, hey, we'll get the basic version set up. It'll take us probably a couple days, but we always say a week or less just to be on the safe side. It'll take a few hours of work from one of your engineers. We'll handle the rest. And a lot of people are skeptical of that, but we've followed through on that. Then obviously customizations take longer. But I tell them all, I'm like, hey, you can just have it for 2, 3 months. It's not going to change your infrastructure. If you decide not to use crafting, we can rip it out. It won't break anything for all of you. Like everything's going to be fine. It is as risk-free as we can make it because we are so confident that it will make such a big difference for you that you're going to use it. And that's been true for every one of our pilots. So we go into it just giving them time. And then I view it as I'm not trying to extract maximum value or anything like that. I want to make sure that we are a critical part of engineering infrastructure that just
Mm.
uplifts their team for the next 5 to 10 years. And so some customers want to do a slow ramp. They're like, well, we're not sure how much we want to use this. Maybe a small fraction of the team will use it, maybe more. And I always just say, that's fine. I think that your entire team will be on this within 6 months, but let's do a slow ramp. And if we see an aggressive increase, let's talk, let's negotiate and just make sure we're being fair on both sides. But at the end of the day, I want your business. I want your business to succeed and I want your engineers to be happy. So let's just figure it out. And so taking that approach from day one, I think some VCs might be a little not thrilled about that, shall we say, because it's a bit of a slower sales motion. It is very high touch. And yes, we need to figure out how to make things more efficient. But it does build trust from day one because I'm not going in trying to just get as much money as possible. I just want people to try it. And the reality is, even if somebody doesn't convert after the pilot, they'll tell us why. And that helps make
Yeah,
us better.
yeah, yeah. I think the other thing is business. I mean, the other thing about what you're saying, it seems to me, is that business is based on trust.
Mhm.
I mean, to come back to the staffing thing, I mean, if you recruit people and you can't trust them, I mean, why on earth did you recruit them? To come back to
Absolutely.
we were talking about getting the right people on the bus, and I think there's an element of that with customers. If you recruit the wrong customers, you're going to have problems. So you need to build up a
Yes.
relationship. Now that you've got I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who regularly fires customers if they don't fit with her view of how she wants to build her customer. Now that's quite brave, but I think there's a lot to it because if
Mhm.
you're always working with the right customers, you're inevitably going to make more progress
Mhm.
because you've got better relations. You're not tangled up with other stuff. So I think it's a really interesting idea. That let me ask you though about the kind of differences globally. I mean, doing business
Mhm.
in LA very different from doing business in London or doing business in Frankfurt or something. I mean,
Mhm.
how do you the partnering thing is really important.
Mhm.
But of course, there are going to be cultural factors, for want of a better way of
Mhm.
describing it, from different jurisdictions, different parts of the world. I mean, how do you manage those sort of nuances within the context of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So at this point, all of our customers are based in North America. So we haven't really run into too many of those cultural issues yet, but we still see some when dealing with, shall we say, more tech forward newer companies
Mm.
versus our discussions and negotiations with some more traditional large organizations, true enterprise companies that might not be as tech forward, right? And to your point earlier about risk, right? With those latter companies, things do move a bit slower. There is a bit more hesitance. The reality is, though, within engineering, there is a lot of social proof, and we have some great customers, right? People will look at our website and say, "Oh, well, we're powering these environments for Brex, for Fair, for Verkada, Lime, Instabase, Persona," right? And they see these logos with really high quality engineering teams and they say, okay, well, if it's good enough for them, it's probably good enough for us. And I think that social proof really just goes a long way. And once we get our foot in the door, that's when it really comes down to, can we build trust with them directly? And with engineers, there is something universal about, okay, reliability, uptime, security, responsiveness. All of these are aspects in terms of how we engage with our customers. And this is why we brought our solutions architect on board earlier on than most, whereas most companies have just a bunch of engineers and are trying to respond to customers, where I want to invest in those relationships, having an engineering lead who can have those conversations, kind of have technical negotiations, but also build the things that customers need.
Mm. I mean, and it's interesting you describe it that way because what I think saying that you're going to invest in those relationships sends a really important message to customers that you're
Mhm.
committed. Otherwise, why invest? If you're not bothered about it, you wouldn't invest.
Mhm.
And I think that to come back to the point about trust, I think that's one of the things that builds trust is that willingness to
Mhm.
invest and to contribute. It's not all just about taking. And I often think
Yep.
people get that the wrong way round. Um, just let me ask you about the idea of community around,
Mhm.
I mean, I've speaking to people that would say they work with a community of engineers, not just people in their business, but people that they
Mhm.
outsource stuff to. I mean, what's your take on managing the kind of community within which all this stuff happens? Do you feel you have a role there?
I feel we should have a role there, but I don't think we do today.
Right.
And I think one of the big challenges is that I don't think there's a really strong established community within this slice of engineering. And candidly, that's something I want to solve. Um, this was actually something Discord did really well. They
Right.
had a server for all third-party developers who were building on their API, and you had rabid fans of the platform who were
Yeah.
in there on a regular basis debating things. One of our PMs would have town halls every month to talk about the latest changes, and people would either be ecstatic or really upset. And it's a lot to manage. There were a bunch of people that were very involved in making that happen and then maintaining it. Um, but at the same time, you get this community that is really bought in that helps you build the best thing you can. But they also build on top of your platform, which honestly makes it more powerful and is great for the business, right? Another example of these aligned incentives where the people get they want, the business gets what they want, lots of opportunity for people internally. It's great. I think for us in the space we're in, that has been something that has been top of my mind, to be honest.
Mm.
And as we think through our positioning, our role in the industry, how we present ourselves to our customers, but also other partners who might not be paying customers, but people we collaborate with, um, I actually want to build that out. I think community and those human relationships between people dealing with the same problems are so important and so powerful. And it's something I invest in multiple roles previously that I think if you can do it, it's critical to do so.
Mm. I mean, the thing that was behind my question was this idea of people advocating for you and whether having, more and more people advocating for you helps you drive the growth of the business. I think. So come back to your thing
Yeah.
about what VCs are interested in. I mean, VCs are always interested in stuff that drives growth, aren't they? I mean, it
Mhm.
strikes me that if you can build up that community of people that are positive about what you're doing and the technology you're building. It's a way of kind of driving growth. I mean, that was what was behind my question. It seems to be that's such an important. It's a. I know all the talk at the moment is about product-led growth. I get that, but it seems to me that the kind of the way the community engages with the product is also a really important driver.
Absolutely. I think having that advocacy in the industry is huge. You'll see this with a ton of open source platforms as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
companies that open source their product, made it available, people loved it, then wanted to bring it to their company, and then you get a deal because you're managing that open source version, right? I think for us, one thing that has been really gratifying to see is that engineers that are current customers, when they end up leaving, going to a new company, they start complaining, saying, "Why aren't we using crafting?" And so
Okay.
we've actually gotten more outreach and more customers over the past 6, 9 months as people have started shifting jobs. Um, And it's actually really funny because I'll get outreach from non-ideal customers. You're talking earlier about firing customers that are non-ideal. We'll have 5, 10 person teams reach out saying, "Hey, we loved crafting at this previous job." I'm like, "That's great, but we're heavyweight and meant for larger organizations. You can use us, but this is going to be a lot of work for you, relatively speaking, because half an engineer's time to really dig in and understand what's going on over here for a couple weeks is very expensive for you, right?" And it's also a small contract for us. So there's this question of, is it really worth our time? At the same time, we'll have engineers join large organizations and they reach out, and that's always really, really satisfying
Mm.
because they've built these things that have worked for years. Somebody comes in and said, no, this is crap. We need crafting instead. And that's kind of a cool moment.
And I guess it's reassuring because it tells you that they're identifying exactly the problem that you want to solve
Hmm.
because it's causing them a frustration. It's the friction thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And let me ask you about your journey. I mean, you've built a really extraordinary bit of technology, I think. It's got really wide application. I know you're relatively early stages with it at the
Mhm.
moment, but it seems to me it's got lots of application. I mean, I'm not a techie person, but I can see the thing that you're working on and the value of that. When you look back on your journey, I mean, if you, what would you say are the big things that you've learnt along the way?
Specifically as a founder, I would say I think this is the most common thing you hear from every founder, right? But knowing when to let things go. Like I spent more time building our website than I probably should have, and should have just hired a contractor because, I've done a lot of front end development. Like I can do it. But that time would probably have been better spent thinking through, okay, what's our marketing strategy? What does funding look like for the next couple of years? What does hiring look like for the next couple of years? And taking a few more hours each week to do that, right? Instead of falling back to something comfortable and familiar when I have a couple extra hours at the end of the week or even on a weekend, right? Um, that has probably been the biggest lesson for me, to be honest, because there's so many instances where that comes up, whether it's building the website, whether it's thinking through our positioning, whether thinking through hiring or some of the technical challenges we're running into. Um, the other one, this is a bit more mundane, but invest in a good solution to track all of your revenue. I think if you just keep relying on spreadsheets that continue evolving as you get more and more customers, it gets really messy really quickly. And so when you think through, okay, we have this much funding for the next couple of years, but is it 20 months or is it 24 months, right? Like these little questions that are hard to answer. It's like, okay, did I actually set this thing right in the spreadsheet over here? It just gets kind of messy. So that's kind of a micro point around use the tools you need,
Yeah,
right? Just figure out how to leverage yourself, even if you need to pay a little bit extra, just because being effective with how you use your time is how the business is going to be successful, right?
yeah,
There's a lot to do. There's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot we need to be involved in as early stage founders. We shouldn't relinquish anything to everybody else and just abandon what's happening. But if you can get these efficiencies, whether it's using popular AI tools or paying for some random service, go for it.
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting area. And the reason I'm asking is that you hear this cliche a lot about working in the business or working on the business. I mean, I don't know whether you hear
Mhm.
that in America. You hear it in the UK all the time, which is very easy to say. But it's much more difficult if you're there working out, what is it that I'm not going to do
Yeah.
compared to what I am I going to do? Do I need to pull back a bit and think about the kind of the longer
Mhm.
term issues, or do I need to get stuck in the weeds and get this problem fixed? It's quite a difficult thing to do in practice. It's very easy to make the
Mhm.
point, but when you decide, I mean, your point was about deciding what you prioritize. I mean, how
Mhm.
did you just talk me through how you worked out what to prioritize and what not to prioritize? Because that's the key question. What do
Yeah.
you prioritize? What is the thing that you think will create the best value or most value?
Yeah. I think there's two things that have helped a lot. Um, One is having a great co-founder. I think being a solo founder is really, really hard. Um, I chat with my co-founder pretty often, and we'll talk through a lot of these things of what is the best use of our time, or what do we need to focus on, or what do we need to see from the business, and we'll just riff for a while. The other thing is, I think I could be accused of being a productivity nerd. I have my own setup and all this other stuff, right? But so one of the things that I do is I've got my to-do list of stuff. I try and schedule things on my calendar, but more than that, every single morning I sit down for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm just thinking, what do I need to accomplish today? What
Mm,
is the most important thing? I don't try and say, here's my to-do list, let me go through them all. It's if I do these three things, will today be a success?
yeah,
And then if I need to drop other stuff, I will. If I have more time, I'll catch up on those other things too. But, some days it's just, I need to figure out our Q1 strategy, right? We have a bunch of upcoming launches. We have a bunch of new customers we want to announce. We have some marketing moments we want to think through. And I'm working with somebody to figure out some of the content for it on Thursday. Maybe I need to just spend today to really refine that because I have it in my head, but it's not as clear as it needs to be. And if that means I delay our financial tracking for a few days, or if I delay looking at this one PR somebody sent out for our new AI assistant or something like that, I'll do that, right? Because I know it's the most important thing to do today. So as long as I take that time to just be honest with myself, and then I have my co-founder holding me accountable and tell me this does or doesn't make sense, then I think that's all you really need.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the next step, though, which is how do you get? I mean, what you've described to me seems to me to be an eminently sensible way of doing things. Work out in the morning what are the most three or four things you need to get
Mhm.
done today. That seems to me to be a pretty good strategy. How do you then get your team doing the same thing? Because I don't know about you. I mean, I'm one of these people that can be very easily distracted if I come across something that interests me,
Mhm.
and lose track of what I should be doing and get focused on the
Mhm.
shiny thing in the corner. And people are like that, often like that.
Mhm.
I mean, particularly people that are curious, and often engineers are quite
Mhm.
curious about stuff. How do you get your team focused on the right stuff? I mean, what's the process that you use to
Yeah,
to get that happening?
it's a good question. Um, this goes back to over communicating and line incentives as well. My co-founder and I have a list of all the most important tech work that needs to be done,
Hmm.
right? Where here's the P zeros that we need to focus on, here's things that are below the cut line, here's things we eventually want to do at some point, right? And engineers, we're not saying you can't do any of the other stuff, but the highest priority stuff is what people need to focus on. And so what we end up doing is we don't just say, hey, you need to do X. It's, hey, we need to accomplish Y, and we're going to do that by building X. So people get it, right? It's, hey, this customer needs support for this other cloud provider by this date.
So you're
So
so what you're saying
yeah,
is you're focusing on the outcomes.
yeah, this goes back to the outcome oriented discussions, right? It's like, hey, if you don't build this customer won't have the support that they need. Things are going to thrash there. We may lose them and we're going to burn trust with them.
Hmm.
And so it's not even a question of them wondering, okay, why does this matter? It's just like, okay, cool. I'm going to go do this because this is important. Leave me alone. Let me know if something comes up. But to your point about curiosity, I want that curiosity.
Hmm.
And people actually bring things up in our Slack channels. We have a couple different channels dedicated to things that are going on in the industry or in AI or whatever. And people say, hey, I saw this new framework launch that maybe we need to dig into. Or as I'm going through our rebrand, one of our engineers said, hey, I really like how this one company positions themselves. I've been using their product a ton and they built a bunch of trust in me. I'm like, that's really good to know because a lot of our customers probably think the same way you do, right? And so it sparks these conversations. I don't think distractions are a bad thing. Because again, this goes back to the initial thing of are you delivering on the outcomes that we need to deliver on? If so, I don't care how many coffee breaks you take. I don't care if you're getting distracted by this other stuff. In fact, I want you to look at all the other stuff that's out there. But then it's on my co-founder and me and our tech leads to make sure that we're being efficient with how people are using their time at work, right? If somebody's getting stuff done early and they have a bunch of other time, it's like, cool, like, do you want some other stuff? How do we encourage you to do that? And, if people have enough equity in the company, they'll want to say, hey, I think we can close a few more major contracts if we build this thing. So I'm going to do that in my spare time. Thumbs up. Great. Go for it.
Yeah. And to come back to the thing about what you've learned, I mean, if you were to go and start again, if you were to go back to day one, is there anything you would do differently given what you know now?
Um, yes. I think I would have brought on some external help a little bit earlier for rebuilding our website and doing our design work and thinking through our content strategy. Um, I would have done a lot more cold outreach, well, warm outreach through my network earlier on instead of like picking and choosing individuals because I was a little hesitant to go to people and say, hey, buy this thing, right? I was like, let me refine this first. Like, no, let me fail. And even if I fail and you say no, I will come back in 3 months and say, hey, things are better now. What do you think? Right. Um, and I probably would have brought our salesperson on earlier, to be honest. I think a lot of people say don't bring on sales too early. There's a lot of concerns. But I think they look at it as traditional sales where you bring on an SDR and they're getting meetings for you. I don't care about that. I would have brought somebody on earlier to help me figure out how do we do cold outreach and scale this out because I am not good at managing email campaigns, sending out hundreds of emails a week that are high signal and high intent. But having somebody else do that for a few months makes a huge difference. So
Mm.
why wouldn't I have done that early on if we had found the right person? And we have the right person now, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And if you, I mean, let me ask you, given what you've learned and given your experiences and the things that you might do different, I mean, what advice would you give to a rookie CEO who was just starting out? I mean, how would you encapsulate all those things in a form that would help somebody else avoid some of the
Yeah.
things that you've done, or some of the things that
Yeah.
you've had that have been problematic?
Uh, I would actually go one level above and say build a strong network of other founders whom
Mm,
you trust and aren't afraid to ask for help from. For all of these lessons that I've learned, and even on a regular basis, I joke about it with a bunch of other founders that I sync up with every now and then. It's basically founder therapy. We keep each other sane. And the pressure we put on ourselves, the emotional highs and emotional lows of what we're dealing with, and the way we think about stuff, other people can understand it, but they don't internalize the same way.
yeah.
They're not going to empathize like, I just lost this massive deal. Like, oh my goodness, I just closed this huge deal, right? Like our emotions shouldn't ride that high or low based on those, but they will. And
Mm,
so having other founders help ground us or think through, oh man, it's really painful going through this fundraising process or rethinking our positioning or whatever. In those conversations, that's where you hear from people, hey, have you tried talking to this person? Or have you tried focusing on this other thing instead? Or hiring somebody to help you out with this, right? And they'll share their experiences of what did and didn't work for them. You learn from each other. That makes a huge difference because when you're at a larger company, you have friends, you have other people you're working with. There's this sense of community by default because you're all on the same team.
mm,
When you're a founder, that's much harder to have.
mm.
And if you don't invest in that, it's easy to get lost, get in your own head, and start spiraling potentially. But
Yeah.
if you've got other founders you can lean on and rely on, it feels like you have a team of a bunch of other people who are doing amazing things. You kind of lift each other up. So that's honestly the most important thing for any early founder.
Yeah. Surround yourself with smart people that will help you move forward. I mean, it
Mhm.
seems to me it'd be pretty good advice that. And have you ever been given some really good advice? I mean, when you look back, have you had somebody that said to you, you should do this and it's really paid off? Have you had anything like that?
Um, I mean, it sounds kind of trite, right? But it's just hire that design firm, try out this marketing person, hire a salesperson to help you out right now because you're just drowning in calls for no reason. Um, these sound like small, trivial things, but I was resistant when non-founders told me, when maybe I shouldn't have been, because like, no, I need to be in these calls. I need to be present because I'm the one who can close. I can make all this stuff happen. I still am in every call, but I felt the need to be involved in every stage of outreach, right? But talking to other founders who made the transition from, oh, here's how we went from pure outreach from me to having somebody help me out and still do founder-led sales, that's huge. Hearing another founder say, yeah, we were running into similar issues with positioning and this person made a huge difference and helped us out, made it much more real and tangible, right? So I don't know if there's been one large lesson on an existential level that has fundamentally changed things. I would say a lot of those principles I have actually came from previous experience in larger organizations as well, because leadership is leadership, management is management, sales is sales, right? Whether you're at a tiny startup or a large
Yep.
organization,
Yeah.
learning to deal with people is a skill that you develop over time and you need to just invest in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, actually. Let me ask you something that's not really about your business, but about the broader context at the moment.
Mhm,
So, just as we draw this to an end, I mean, everybody's talking about AI. I mean, you can't have a conversation with people in business without talking about AI at the moment. It's kind of
mhm,
ubiquitous, really. And, it's exciting. I think
mhm,
the potential of the technology is really exciting. And we're at a very early stage still, I think.
mhm.
What's your take on the way AI is going to kind of shake down over the next year or two, given the sector that you're in? I mean, you're working with the people that build it, use it, deploy it. I mean, what's your take on the way things are going to unfold?
So there's a few different questions in there. In the way people build and deploy from an infrastructure standpoint, I think that we're going to see um, AI agents start operating similarly to how engineers, marketers, and a bunch of other people today work. And it's going to be more of an augmented workflow. Engineers are managing fleets of agents. Marketing teams are relying on marketing agents to help scale their operations out, sales as well, all of that stuff, right? So I think there'll be more of this co-pilot analogy, and I think Microsoft at least got that branding right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in terms of the models themselves and how they shift and evolve, there's this question of how much they learn. I am not an ML or AI expert, and I think there's people much smarter than me who have said how those are going to change. But if we start treating them as co-pilots, I think we're going to see the shift where this past year there's been a lot of what people call work slop, right? Use AI to just generate that stuff and send it out. Um, I think it's better to treat them similar to how there's a concept in engineering called rubber duck debugging, where if something's broken, you have a rubber duck on your desk and you just pick it up and you talk to it. You say, I'm running into this issue over here. And you anticipate what it would say. It's like, well, have you tried doing X? Like, okay, let me try doing X, right? It's basically running through a problem with somebody else without having the other person there.
Right. Okay.
I think AI becomes a more efficient rubber duck debugging for everybody. I'm trying to do market research and analysis on this one company that we're thinking about investing in. Okay, well, AI will say, have you considered doing these things? Okay, let me do that. And it becomes more of this way of catching your blind spots
Mm.
as opposed to relying on it to think for you. Right. And I think that has been very effective for a lot of engineers, for a lot of writers these days, people in corporate. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that where AI can actually take some actions for you. It's like, oh, cool. Yes, I want to do these things. Pull this data for me while I think through how I want to structure this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it comes back a minute later with all this market research and information structured in the way you want. And you just keep tweaking it, right? I think that's going to be very powerful. And maybe this will be one take. People are going to use voice a lot more.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I know some engineers who use Whisperflow and don't even write code with their keyboard anymore. They
Mm.
just talk to their computer, which earlier this year was a joke about people trying to vibe code with voice agents, and it was just a mess. But it's kind of becoming real now.
Yeah, yeah, and it will improve fairly
Mhm.
rapidly. Is my reading of that. I mean, I love the idea of the rubber duck debugging. I mean, I think that's. I mean, I can't help. I'm going to think about AI, and when I think about AI, I'm going to think about a rubber duck now. I mean, I can't unsee that idea. So that's lovely, actually. I mean, Sumeet, thank you for sharing that story with us. I mean, like I said, it's a great proposition that you're developing. I think it'll have a really positive impact on people because of what it does over time. So thank you for sharing the story and those insights. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to unsee the rubber duck idea now, but it was a great chat, and I really appreciate you making time to come and talk to us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having us on, Paul. I think this was a great conversation. It was great to get to dig into things.
Lovely. Speak to you soon. Cheers then.
Take care.
Bye bye.